I'm getting started. Good afternoon, or good evening. I have to say that it is a pleasure to be here in the Bronx. My second favorite borough that starts with the letter P. You'll have to guess what my first. I love the Bronx. And I just wanted to shout out to our borough president, Mr. Gibson. Our team is here tonight.
Yes.
That's my love. All right, so we are thrilled to have you here for the public hearing at our fifth meeting of the 2024 Charter Revision Commission, and the first of two public hearings that will be held here in the Bronx. It is also the second of three issue forums that the commission will host to take a deep dive into important topics affecting our city. Last week, our forum was about fiscal issues, fiscal responsibility, fiscal integrity, and we had a very robust evening. Today, today we are focusing on good government and election reform matters, and we'll hear from a number of experts on these subjects, as well as New Yorkers at large. Later this week on Thursday, we will be in Brooklyn, hosting a forum on public safety, and we hope that you will be there. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Ronald Chasseur, and I have the honor of chairing this esteemed group of New Yorkers and Charter Teach. So we are joined today by, to my right, our vice chair, the one and only Hazel Dukes, Kyle Bragg, who served with me on the last commission. Christopher Lynch is on Zoom, and Jackie Rowe is to my left. I want to thank our executive director, our general counsel, and the entire staff who are working really hard to make these meetings a great success. And I think anybody else on Zoom from the commission? Just Mr. Lynch? Okay. I would like to thank Christopher Loder, the CEO of Lincoln Hospital, for hosting us today, and everybody here at Lincoln for doing such great work in Bronx. Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm gonna.
On behalf of Mr. Brooklyn and leadership, to welcome you to the great people in the whole city of the now put up that you're from the other side.
The other part.
I want you to feel very welcome here. I appreciate it, and we're looking forward to the forum and to what you're going to be here from our constituents. Thank you all very much for joining us.
We appreciate it. Thank you. I will say this about the Bronx. I'm going off everything right now, but as an Italian American, son of Italian immigrants from Brooklyn, the Bronx has a much better living than. I'm going to say that. Let me just ask our commissioners to say a couple of words, if they can. Ms. Dukes, I'm going to start with you.
I'm pleased to see that someone we're not quiet, I've been sitting out my former president of the Bronx branch in ACPC. Mr. Gray, and when we get here, just living behind the Bronx, don't miss it, they get out here, and I hope others show up. I think that, Chairman, this is such an important task that we have taken on with the office. This is a time when our borders can be heard. We hear about closed door meetings and people not having a chance to say anything, but this is your hearing. And so we hope that you encourage your fellow other people and girls to attend this and say what's on your mind.
Thank you. Again, conference is not to serve on the commission as an opportunity on the service to call over the last commission by way of the Blasio. I think it also, as Mama Duke said, articulated, very important to hear from the residents of New York City about how we make government work to all New Yorkers. And there's a great opportunity here to come to this commission and give your thoughts and ideas of how we can revise the charter to make sure that it meets the needs and government meets the needs of all of New York City citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Jackie Rowe Adams.
So good evening, everyone. I'm honored to be here this evening and sit here in the famous beautiful Lincoln Hospital. I want to thank our Mayor Adams, for putting this commission together. Because oftentimes we don't get a chance for our voices to be heard. So this is an opportunity, as you have heard, for all voices to be heard about what goes on in the industry, what goes on in this city. And that's why I am so proud to be a part of the commission, to be the voice for the voices. So we have work to do, and we need you to do. Get the word out. It's very important. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. And we enjoy the light step in the Bronx, because the Bronx would you like to say that.
Thank you all so very much. My name is Stephanie Brown, so honored to be a part of the Charter Commission and these years. I live in the Bronx. I get all for the people. We are here for the people, and we're just so honored to be able to thank the mayor for putting it together. And we want to hear from you. We want to hear your ideas, and because we're here for you. So thank you so very much, and I'm going to thank my fellow commissioners.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so apparently we're having some technical difficulties on this evening. So I'm going to try and speak very clearly. If there is something I can do with my phone, if it makes sense to log in or something, I'll use my phone. You guys let me know. Okay, so before we hear from our speakers and the members of the public, let me just say a few words as to why we are here this evening. The Charter Review Commission is tasked with reviewing the entire city charter and recommending changes that will help city government work more efficiently and better serve all New Yorkers. In addition to reviewing the charter, we will also be soliciting recommendations and comments on how to improve city government from members of the public and experts at forums like this. At the end of the process, the commission will determine what proposals to take to the voters in the form of a ballot question or questions that will appear on the ballot at the November 5th general election. Today, we welcome members of the public to come and vote in person, and hopefully we get Zoom set up and folks on Zoom will be able to jump on Zoom. And we can take comments via testimony if you are unable to jump on. So tonight, we're in a series of meetings to hear from the public and from experts. We will be hosting additional input sessions around the city, and we will be back in the Bronx on July 11th at Fordham University. So please spread the word about our meetings. We will do the best to accommodate everyone.
Future meeting dates are on our website, www.nyc.gov/charter, and comments and testimony may be submitted in writing to charterinfo@citycharter.nyc.gov between now and July 12th. Okay, so to kick us off this evening, it's an honor to welcome City Council member Rafael Salamanca, who is the chair of land use and represents a great portion of the Bronx in the city. You are ready, Councilman. Good to see you.
All right, good to see you all. Good evening. I want to first welcome you to the South Bronx. And welcome to my council district, the 17th Council District. I've had the honor of serving in the New York City Council for the last 8 years. And prior to that, I served as the district manager for Bronx Community Board 2 for about 5.5 years. So today, I will be extremely brief. I just had a common sense idea that I think would make sense and will help out with life issues here in the city of New York. I believe that the Charter Revision Commission should be looking for ways that the charter can be revised so that agencies with expertise in a particular kind of service can make sure that service is used as expansively as possible for New Yorkers. Take sanitation, for example. The sanitation's illegal dumping camera program. These last 2 years, sanitations first started putting up cameras on the city streets to catch illegal. And let's face it, no matter what dumping happens, air conservation, which is typically what we think as a sanitation's wheelhouse. Why should we consider revision that lets the mayor put sanitation to work against all illegal dumping on our city property? Well, I urge the commission to explore whether and how we can make revisions to our charter to achieve that kind of efficient and effective delivery of city services. So basically what I'm trying to get at, currently, we're having an issue in our communities with individuals illegally dumping in our communities. And I know we see it every part of the corner, whether it's someone dumping a wheelbarrow or illegal trash or construction trash from their buildings, and they're not disposing of their property. Well, when there is illegal dumping happening, for example, inside the New York City park, right? It is the responsibility of the New York City Parks Department to clean, to pick up after those that illegally dump. But currently, there are no surveillance cameras to catch those individuals who are illegally dumping. And so sanitation has the ability to do enforcement because there is the sanitation police. Well, they need permission from the New York City Parks Department to do that enforcement. Well, if we change the charter and we allow sanitation to do enforcement on all city land, I think that we'll be able to address what we call quality of life issues in New York City.
So, comments from any of the commissioners?
As a former member of CBTN for some 20-some years, I would like to hear your position as a city council member on land use.
So I'm currently the land use chair in the city council for the last 6 years. We've done some great work. Just recently, we passed the city of Yes, the economic development portion of it. Now, currently, I know that community boards are here in the city of Yes on the housing component. My focus in the New York City Council has been building affordable housing. In my time in the council, my council district alone has approved over 10,000 units of 100% affordable housing. In the last 10 years, when you look at all 51 council districts, the South Bronx has built more affordable housing than 21 council districts when you look at those numbers. Now, the reality is that we are in a housing crisis. But the South Bronx, the borough of the Bronx, cannot build all of the housing for New Yorkers. Every community must do their part. And that has been the focus that we've had with our leader, Speaker Adrian Adams, and that has been the focus of my administration as a language chair.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, Councilman Salomon, for joining us this evening and giving testimony. I think the issue that you raised is very important, not only for Bronx, but throughout the city. I experience issues in Queens about illegal dumping, and it destroys the quality of life of our residents. And I think that it's very important that we consider what you brought to us today in ways of making better the enforcement around stopping this illegal dumping that's taking place throughout our city, particularly our city parks. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we've all seen way too many mattresses thrown out there. So I'm intrigued by the idea, and I just want to make sure I understand it, Councilman. So you would like to see the Department of Sanitation to have the authority to basically fine and find any illegal dumping on any city-owned property.
Yes, currently right now, should there be any illegal dumping inside of the New York City Parks Department or underneath a bridge or underneath a train, they can call sanitation and ask them to clean it up. But what we're missing is the enforcement piece of this. Many individuals are, we got to figure out how do we stop illegal dumping. One way to do this, you have to catch them. One of the examples in the last 3 years, my office has allocated over $540,000 to the sanitation department to install what's called illegal dumping cameras throughout my district. Sanitation has done a great job in catching these individuals. What happens when they catch them? They go to their home, they arrest them, they give them a $4,000 fine, and they confiscate their vehicle. Now imagine if we give sanitation the authority to do this throughout city property, especially in our green spaces, our quality of life.
Great, thank you very much. Okay. Any other questions? We appreciate you taking the time. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, and welcome to the Bronx.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker will be Susan Lerner, followed by Ben Weiner.
Thank you very much. I'm Susan Lerner. I'm the Executive Director of Common Cause New York, and I'm the Board Chair of Rank the Vote, NYC. And I've been asked to talk about a couple of different topics, which I'd like to touch on briefly. The first one I'd like to talk about is New York City's very successful implementation of ranked choice voting. I seem to be losing that one. And to basically attribute that success to the fact that ranked choice voting was very broadly accepted by community-based organizations and voters throughout the city. The support for ranked choice voting, the voter education, the enthusiasm for ranked choice voting really ranged on the gamut of New York City organizations that day in and day out work in their communities to educate voters, to mobilize voters, to help New York citizens understand how their, how their system works and how to have their voices heard. And ranked choice voting successfully allows voters to have more voice and more choice. So the support and the active engagement really, as I said, is broad and citywide. It ranges from the Chinese American Planning Council to the Queens chapter of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Social Action Committee, DC 37, We Act, the NAACP Jamaica branch, the Manning Cantor Center, Anakinich Dominicanos, League of Women Voters of New York City. I could go on and on. But New York City's adoption of ranked choice voting really has become a model for the rest of the country. And I think we are all to be congratulated for that success and for allowing this sort of a reform to flourish. I've also been asked to talk about primary reform. I'd like to say, first off, Common Cause New York does not have a position currently on primary reform, but I think there's a lot of confusion about the different types of primary reform and what does or doesn't work in different places. What we have done and what I will provide when I provide written testimony in a few days is a link to the polling, which we did with the support of the New York Community Trust for unaffiliated voters. Because I think a lot of the discussion around do we need to change our primaries arises from the fact that the second largest registration in our city is unaffiliated voters. And so we went and we talked to unaffiliated voters. We polled them, we did focus groups, and I think we have a better insight into what motivates the unaffiliated voters. Interestingly enough, unaffiliated voters see themselves as being very engaged. But what they do not want is they do not want to be affiliated with a party. They were very, very clear about that. They see themselves as engaged, they see themselves as thoughtful, and they believe that they make determinations on how to cast their votes based on candidates and not party label. So when you look at the different types of primary reform, they run the gamut from what's called an open primary, but there's a lot of confusion about what that means. An open primary is actually a primary where all candidates run in the same primary, whether it's a nonpartisan primary or a primary where the candidates are allowed to state their party affiliation. But then there are what's called a partially closed primary and a partially open primary. And that is a primary system that allows voters to show up and either register for a party on the spot at their polling place and then vote in that primary, and then they remain registered in that party going forward. Or a system like the one that's been used for a number of years in Massachusetts, and that is the voter shows up, ascertains, shows that they are unaffiliated, and they get to choose which primary they will vote in that day without a party affiliation. And I don't think it will surprise you when I say that our polling and our focus group showed that to the extent that unaffiliated voters wanted to vote in primaries and they wanted to see a change, they did not want to be required to register in a party, even for a short period of time. We were surprised that there was not more motivation on the part of unaffiliated voters. Some of them were frustrated that they could not vote in primaries. Others were surprisingly protective of the parties, where they said, well, it's a party primary and party members should get to choose who is going to run on behalf of their party. So we did not see a clear winner. We didn't have any one form of primary reform where the unaffiliated voters told us in the 50 or 60 percentiles that that was what they favored. So I think, we have an interesting challenge when we look at primaries, when the people we are trying to bring back into a more active voting frame of mind at the primary level tell us they don't have one particular favorite, but they all see themselves as engaged, and they reported to us that they vote in most elections where they are able to vote. So the third topic I'd like to address is one that I think when we talk about open primaries, we're kind of getting to, and that is the question of voter turnout. Voter turnout is a complicated, multifaceted issue. There are relatively few things we can point to that we know reliably will increase voter turnout. We, as advocates for ranked choice voting, have not pointed to ranked choice voting as a solution to low turnout, but I will note that there is a slight bump up. We had the highest turnout for a primary election in several decades in 2021 with ranked choice voting. We've seen similar reasonable but not overwhelming increases in other places that have adopted ranked choice voting. We know that same-day voter registration, which you can't control, is another factor that helps increase the turnout rate. But most significantly, what we do see looking across the country, and actually there was just a study which came out dealing with Las Vegas having adopted, having consolidated their elections to even years. And they did that in 2019, and subsequently the turnout rate for Las Vegas municipal elections has increased by nearly 50%. So this is a very, I think, interesting factor, an issue that can really make a difference. It can cut down on costs, and it can definitely help turnout. I have no doubt that it would have the same effect here in New York City as it did in any of the municipalities across the country that have adopted it. Now, the question of whether the council on its own can make that change, perhaps it does require a state constitutional amendment, but a strong statement on the behalf of New York City residents. If they want that reform, we hear over and over from voters that there are too many elections, they cannot keep up, and there is a burnout factor. So, I think having a opportunity to be heard on the question of consolidating our elections would give our voters an opportunity to speak up for themselves. And finally, I want to commend the members of the commission. You are really facing a very difficult task. You have a much shorter time period than any other commission. It's really unusually short time to consider a wide variety of proposals. And I would suggest that making significant changes to the way in which we vote in city elections requires a thorough examination and shouldn't be rushed. 2 separate charter revision commissions considered ranked choice voting before it was placed in front of the voters, where it was passed by an overwhelming majority. And we would recommend to this charter revision commission that we might follow the example of the 2018 charter revision commission, where when they ran out of time, and they also had a relatively short time period, although longer than the one you've been presented with. And what they chose to do was they identified issues that they thought were important for further study, and recommended that future charter revision commissions dive further than they were able to on at least 2 significant issues that they identified. And I think that that would be a very productive use of your time and attention when you are faced with this very short time frame, to be able to identify the issues you believe are important but that could benefit from further study, because precipitous changes are always difficult to accomplish and implement successfully. So thank you for the opportunity to be heard.
Thank you, Susan. It's always a pleasure to see you. So I would just start with, I happened to be on with my colleague Kyle Bragg at the 2019, and we were excited that ranked choice voting made it on that one. But you said something very, I think, critical. Election reform is a big issue, and it's not just a charter commission that can say, this is what we want to do. We have a piece of it, but then there are state laws and federal laws and so many things that go into it. And, I've been now, this is my 3rd commission that I've been on, and at every one of them, election reform comes up.
Well,
So there should be a moment, I believe, speaking personally, where election reform is part and maybe the only thing of a charter commission in the future.
and that might very well be a very productive discussion, but I think it would need more time to be able to really delve into the ins and outs, because as I said, elections are multifaceted. When we talk to voters, when we're trying to figure out what motivates certain voters, what would help people be more engaged or turn out more frequently, sometimes there are factors which we can change through policy or administration. And sometimes there are factors which are outside of anybody's control to really be able to affect. So having the opportunity to dive in deeply, to really look at the experience in other jurisdictions, I think is very productive in the election area. We've seen a lot of changes at the state level within the last 5 years that I think have really helped remove barriers for voters. And as I said, I'm very grateful for your and Kyle Bragg's service on the 2019 commission, because I do think that being ranked choice voting in front of the voters allowed them to adopt that reform. And as I said, to build the kind of broad citywide support that it has.
Great. Any questions or comments? Kyle, please.
Thank you again for your testimony. I found very interesting your ideas and at least your thoughts on how to build voter turnout. I think it might fall beyond the charge of this commission, but I appreciate the fact that you brought this here today, because we really need to think about how we can build voter turnout in the city. To have 5% of the electorate elect our leaders, it's just terrible.
Yeah.
And so the idea of consolidating elections, I think, really has legs. So I don't know where we take that next, but the idea of having to build out voter turnout is a really important issue, and I appreciate that you brought that to this table today.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Okay,
Thank you.
Susan Lerner, thank you very much. Ben Weinberg. Next, after Ben, we will have John Ketchum.
Yes. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Ben Weinberg, and I'm the Director of Public Policy for Citizens Union. I first would like to thank you for the opportunity, giving us the opportunity to speak before you today, and for your time in dedicating your time for this very important task. Citizens Union is a non-partisan government group committed to reforming the Union state governments by fostering accountability, honesty, and the highest ethical standards. And throughout our now very long history, we have supported periodic comprehensive reviews of the charter to ensure that city government is operating effectively, efficiently, and in the public's best interest. And we have also advised every charter revision commission over the years, and many of our recommendations have been adopted. So this experience informs the following recommendations we make before you today. And I'll start with the ones related to the process of this commission. First, we believe that the 2 summer months under which the commission is currently operating is too short. We think this is unfortunately insufficient time to conduct the kind of comprehensive review of the charter through a thorough and extensive public process that engages the public meaningfully. Now, we thank the commission for the numerous public hearings that they have both held and will hold, and for the great level of transparency that the commission has shown so far. But we believe that 2 months to conduct this sort of review and recommend large changes is not something that is recommended. Instead, we ask commissioners to continue your work for several more months and not be under the pressure of this 2024 ballots question deadline, and then submit your proposals to the 2025 ballots, November ballot. Now, I know that the last charter reviewing commission did pretty much the same. What was called the Racial Justice Commission. They ended their work in December and then sent their questions on to the following year, to the ballot in the following year. However, I should say that if this commission decides to continue with its current deadline, we do believe that the proposals that are proposed should be narrow in scope because of this rush timeline. And Ms. Lerner here mentioned that 2018 and 2019 commission. I will also note that the only commission that was shorter than this in time was Mayor Bloomberg's commission in 22. And that commission also considered, by the way, nonpartisan elections. But because of much criticism about that short time, like that was a month in the summer. The criticism because of that short time, and that commission decided to put a much narrower proposal on the November 22 ballot at that time, and then move the discussion of nonpartisan elections to a future commission. And this could be any policy. I'm not only referring to nonpartisan election, of course. Our third recommendation here is related to timelines. We are aware of the kind of political context in which this commission is operating, and I do want to know that similar to our comments here about timeline, we have testified before the council on the rush process that they brought their kind of latest attempt for a charter revision, which was the proposed expansion of advice and consent. We think that the charter should have set timelines for charter revision commissions and other processes for major charter revisions to prevent this sort of gamemanship, which is not the first time we've seen. We've seen that during the 90s under Giuliani and that council. We've seen that during the Bloomberg era. So our recommendation is that the city charter will include requirements for time frames for charter revision commission. We know in our written testimony that we recommend requiring at least 180 days between a charter revision's first meeting and the filing of ballot proposals. And then at least 30 days between the final report of a charter revision commission and the filing of ballot proposals. And similarly, we recommend that a local law that amends the charter and is sent by the council to a referendum will also be required, first of all, to vote on twice by the city charter with 30 days apart and a public hearing before a vote. And here we are kind of trying to reflect the logic of the state constitution. Any amendment for the state constitution requires 2 passes in the state and the legislature. We think these proposed timeframes could be further reviewed. The exact numbers I mentioned are not critical, but the critical point here is injecting the necessary time to conduct a serious charter revision process, including ample time for the public media and various stakeholders to participate in the process. We think adopting such timeframes would strengthen the charter, improve collaboration between the 2 branches, and strengthen public's trust in government. And our written testimony has a nice little chart about with the different length of charter revisions, so we can take examples of the other timelines. Our other recommendations are related to, excuse me, sorry. Our other recommendation is also related to improving turnout. As Mr. Lerner has mentioned here, we also support moving New York City municipal elections to even numbered years. This would not only increase voter turnouts up and down the ballot, this will also help reduce racial and age-based gaps across the city and produce significant cost savings. This has been done in over 100 cities in the last decade around the country. It's a well-tested reform, and it is one of the kind of few things we can do to boost turnout in our city elections. I should say that as Susan has mentioned, this would require constitutional amendment. So our request is to include that in your final report as an issue to be discussed or an issue that this commission supports. On ranked choice voting, we want to reaffirm our support for the use of ranked choice voting in municipal primaries. This was adopted by the 2019 charter revision and has proven useful in promoting a competitive, open, and fair election. And we believe it has been properly implemented in both the major citywide election in 2021, a small-scale election in 2023, and several special elections. And we asked the commission to maintain that system as is. Lastly, the primary reform was mentioned here. We have supported opening the city's primary by adopting what's called the top 2 election system for many years. So under that system, the first primary election is open to all eligible voters, regardless of their party status, so that every registered voter can participate in the primary. And then party registrants and unaffiliated voters, and the top 2 candidates advance to a general election in November. We have proposed this reform before the 2010 commission and the 2018 commission. But I do want to reiterate our position on moving so fast with major changes. So although we do support this sort of system, we think this should not be taken on in such a quick time. Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good. Any questions or comments? Okay, I just want to note on something that you said earlier, and forgive me if I'm paraphrasing. I want to, and I'm going to take the liberty of speaking for all of us, if I may. We are not part of any political gamemanship. We are not part of any whatever is happening in the political world. We are a group of independent New Yorkers, none of whom work for the mayor or the city council, who have been brought together to listen to folks and be out in places across the city for a few months. And I can tell you that while it may seem like a short time frame, I have been, since appointed as chair, working on charter issues 7 days a week. So it may seem short to the public, but I think, Susan, you'll appreciate that every day there are emails and testimonies to read, so, I'm not gonna comment on the meat on the bone of your testimony, because I know you submitted something. But I want to be clear that we are all independent and here for New Yorkers.
And just to clarify, it was not my intent to comment on commissioners or the commission itself, but our idea was to create a different system of how charter revisions operate, and not only by charter revision or your charter revision, but also by council initiated charter revisions, so that the public knows in advance that there's a set time in which the public can debate this, commissioners can debate this, and things are kind of clear in advance.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
John Ketchum.
Chair Tesura and members of the Charter Revision Commission, thank you for the honor and opportunity to testify before you today. My name is John Ketchum. Though I research and write on various issues affecting New York City in my capacity as a fellow and director at the Manhattan Institute, I speak before you in my personal capacity as a lifelong and loyal New Yorker. As a preliminary matter, I would like to reiterate the recommendations offered last Thursday by my colleague E.J. McMahon at the Fiscal Responsibility Forum. 5 years and 2 elections after the 2019 charter amendments introduced ranked choice voting for local primary and special elections, New York City's local election dynamics have not fundamentally changed. Turnout remains abysmally low, as Ms. Lerner indicated. Closed primaries limit Democratic participation, and political competition occurs almost entirely within the Democratic Party primary. Manhattan Institute polling conducted this April demonstrates that city voters from all political persuasions are in favor of electoral reforms, including a general satisfaction with ranked choice voting. But to promote greater political competition and turnout, I respectfully recommend that the commission consider 3 alternative electoral systems without endorsing any one over the other. First, final 5 voting, which uses a nonpartisan primary open to all candidates and all registered voters, regardless of party. The top 5 or 4 certain systems, vote getters, again, regardless of party, advance to a general election. Voters in that general election then use ranked choice voting to select a single winner with a majority of the final round votes. Second, for city council elections, the single transferable vote, or STV, is the variety of ranked choice voting that produces multiple winners from each district. New York City, in fact, used this system between 1936 and 1947. It can achieve proportional representation, in which the composition of the elected body matches the makeup of subgroups in the electorate, such as along party lines. Finally, list-based proportional representation systems do not use ranked choice voting. They instead count votes at the party level, and parties receive seats in proportion to their shares of the vote. Many varieties of these list-type systems exist, and in my written comments that will be forthcoming shortly, I discuss the open list type, which I consider the best suited to the city's electoral needs. No matter the electoral system the commission considers, however, I strongly recommend keeping party labels on the ballot to help guide voter decision-making. I have no doubt that many unaffiliated and independent New Yorkers don't want much to do with party registration for themselves, but parties do play a fundamental role in aligning voters' values and preferences with those who are running. They also help form a coherent legislature once the election is over and various lawmakers have to assemble into various coalitions to pass legislation on an issue-by-issue basis. It's really important to consider that local issues do not bifurcate left-right like many national issues do, nor do they assemble neatly into any single ideological package. So your stance on zoning reform or land use is not really going to have that much of an influence on whether you support, let's say, charter schools. They're independent of one another, and therefore that richness and diversity ought to be reflected in the political composition of the city council. As an experimental and innovative reform, I even recommend broadening the information available to voters by allowing endorsements such as from the mayor, comptroller, and local community organizations, civic groups, and newspapers to appear alongside candidates' names on the ballot, alongside the party signal. That would allow for a rich informational signal that could immediately align voters' preferences and values with those who are running. And it doesn't have to just be about party labeling. It could be about the local paper that you read or your local civic group. I also agree with Ms. Lerner's recommendation and comments about the positive effects of moving local elections to an even numbered year cycle. I also believe that that would require a state constitutional amendment, but believe that the positives far outweigh the negatives. The one wrinkle in such a reform, however, would be the length and complexity of ballots. Because you would have in certain.
I'm gonna ask you to wrap up.
Very good, thank you, Chair. As for reforms to the city's procurement systems, I recommend repealing Charter Section 326's requirement that agencies hold a public hearing for proposed contracts of over $100,000 awarded by a method other than competitive sealed bidding. This month, the state legislature did pass legislation that would replace those public hearings with a 7-day online notice and comment period. But if the governor does not sign that legislation into law, I respectfully suggest that the commission consider putting it to the voters. And finally, for emergency procurements, I suggest amending Charter Section 315 to require that procuring agencies submit a copy of awarded emergency contracts and related documentation to the comptroller's office within 30 days. The Procurement Policy Board Rule 212E4 already requires this, but agencies are routinely non-compliant. The comptroller should then be required to post all received emergency contracts on its website for public review and transparency within some reasonable time frame, say 7 days. My written testimony will expand on these proposals, which I hope you have found helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for your testimony. It was a lot. But I want to go back to, because I didn't clearly understand the part where you said the mayor, the controller, everyone need to be closer to when the election is of voting, their name should be next to the person. I didn't understand. Could you be more clear
Of course,
about that, especially for the charter revision?
of course. Thank you, Commissioner, for the question. So the mayor can provide an endorsement that is then printed on the ballot to signal who the mayor's preferred candidate would be to voters immediately upon looking at the ballot. This would signal to voters a sense of affinity with the mayor's agenda, a sense of continuity perhaps between one mayoral administration to the next. And it need not be just the mayor. It could also be the comptroller or other executives. It could also be expanded to local organizations and newspapers, as I said. This allows for competition on an informational level. Not right now, we get a ballot and we only see party label. For many, many voters, that's the only informational signal that they have to guide their decision making. We all would hope that they have done their homework to make an informed and deliberative decision before they reach the ballot box. But research and decades of evidence have shown that that is more of an aspiration than reality. Therefore, I think it is helpful to have immediate informational cues to voters printed alongside candidate names on ballots, like party labels, but for things like Mayor Adams's preferred candidate in a particular race.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have one more speaker in person, and then I will move to the Zooms. Mona Davis in person, and then Melissa Mark Viverito, followed by Frank Morano on Zoom.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Mona Davids. I am a parent. I'm an activist. I'm a newspaper publisher of Little African News, as well as New York Voice, Bronx Voice, Staten Island Voice, Bed-Stuy Voice, Harlem Voice, Queens Voice. I'm missing one, the seventh one. But I want to talk in two different roles. One role as an education and safety activist on behalf of New York City School Safety Coalition, as well as the New York City Parents Union. And then in my role also as a parent, as a longtime Bronxite, as well as a registered voter here. I am also, let me also just say this, I'm also a member of the Bronx NAACP here in the Bronx. And the first thing I want to talk about is what today's hearing is about, which is electoral reform. For the last 3 weeks, I think I've been in Politico almost every week about something with this commission. And today it came up again in Politico that ranked choice voting is successful because it increased voter turnout in 2021. When I testified at the Staten Island hearing, I spoke specifically about ranked choice voting not increasing or improving voter turnout in 2023 when it came to our city council elections. A citywide election is a whole different ballgame. We're talking apples to oranges. When we did a candidate debate with all the mayoral candidates, we had to divide it up because there were so many of them. So it's apples to oranges. What our communities care about, what here in the Bronx, South Bronx, Co-op City, Harlem, Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy, East Flatbush, what we care about matters on the local level. And that is who represents us and who speaks for us as the community. And when it comes to voter turnout in 2023, I don't have my computer here, I had it in Staten Island, but when it comes to voter turnout in 2023, those numbers went down. We had city council members elected, mostly with less than 10%, and I'm just going to talk Democratic primary, not even general election, less than 10% of the Democratic voters in their district, mostly less than 5%. Here in the Bronx NAACP, every election sends out a breakdown of the voter turnout, and it is low. Voter apathy is real. So I just want us to put it in context when we say, oh, ranked choice voting, which I voted no on, but ranked choice voting is successful because it increased voter turnout in the 2021 voter election with so many candidates. That you can't compare that. We're talking about what's happening in our communities with our local city council members. That to us is what matters. And those numbers went down. And why did it go down? Because you know what? Who are our triple prime voters? They are seniors. Seniors didn't understand ranked choice voting. I put it on the record the last time. I had to organize and conduct ranked choice voting workshops. I did for NAACP in Co-op City. I did it for different political clubs, Democratic and Republican clubs, community-based organizations. You can still go on the website, the Facebook page, or ranked choice voting NYC, and you can see all the virtual workshops that we did because our communities were not informed and they were not educated, and that's what resulted in the city council holding a hearing on the preparedness of ranked choice voting and allocating money to make sure that our communities are informed. So again, when we look at the numbers for 2023, when we look at the voter turnout, and when we look at our triple prime voters, our seniors and others, they don't understand it. So that is my position on ranked choice voting, and that is how we dealt with it in our communities. So, and while I understand people like to say, oh, this organization, that organization, that organization. We don't, in my community, in our communities, whether it's the South Bronx, Bed-Stuy, East Flatbush, it doesn't matter, co-op, we don't care about alphabet organizations. We care about our organizations in our communities. So that is with ranked choice voting. Now, I want to speak about advice and consent, as well as the How Many Stops Act. When we look at those numbers of how many people voted for these city council members, when you look at those low percentage turnout numbers for even Democratic voters in the Democratic primary, clearly 90% or almost 90% of the voters in their district don't even come out and vote for them. So how do they speak for them? We're here in the Bronx. If you speak to anybody on the street, they're going to tell you, we want more police officers in our communities. We want community policing. We want to go back to the days when I was growing up in Bed-Stuy in the 80s, where the police officers knew our names and would tell our parents when we cut it. That's what we want. We don't want less police. We want more police. We want to continue with the community engagement and working together with our police officers that keep us safe. We do not want our police officers taking records and filing and you know, keeping track of everybody that may ask them for directions. No. And that is the disconnect that we're talking about, commissioners. The disconnect between the role, what the city council members are doing, and what the people in their communities, whether it's here in the Bronx, in Brooklyn, Southeast Queens, in Staten Island, what we need and what we want. And last but not least, when it comes to advice and consent, in 2021, we elected Eric Adams as mayor. The city as a whole elected him as our public safety mayor. That was the #1 thing that he ran on. So to come now and reverse that with the How Many Stops Act simply does not make sense when it comes to public safety. They're not speaking for us, and they're not speaking for the person that we elected to be our mayor. And they're certainly not speaking for their communities. Next thing I want to talk about, school safety. School safety, public safety. I know this hasn't been brought up here, but the New York Post did an editorial recently, I think yesterday, when it comes to the public advocate's office. And they called on the commission to consider doing away with the public advocate's office. And they went on to speak about the history of the public advocate's office, where the city council president position was eliminated. I'm sorry. Our current public advocate is the reason why we have the How Many Stops Act bill. He was the one that sponsored it. Our public advocate is against keeping our children safe in schools. He is against school safety agents. He is against community policing. This is our public advocate. He doesn't speak for me. He doesn't speak for our communities. He doesn't speak for the mothers that I know whose children have been shot, assaulted, attacked. He does not speak for us. He speaks for his agenda, his ideology, which does not put the interests of our communities first. So I would like the commission to consider rescinding, eliminating, terminating the position of a public advocate, because there really is no reason for us to have a public advocate. We cannot afford it. And I honestly don't know what that office does except for engage us.
I'm going to ask you to wrap up.
Yes.
If you can.
Yes, I will right now. And my final point to this commission is, when it comes to coming back to advice and consent, I would ask you to please yourself go and look at the numbers of the people who voted for city council members and see if they truly indeed reflect their communities, who voted for them, and what their communities are asking for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, any comments or questions? Hearing none, I am going to go to Zoom, and our first speaker on Zoom is former Speaker of the City Council, Melissa Mark Viverito. Melissa, it's great to see you here.
Oh, hello. Hi, how are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, well, good evening to all of you commissioners. Melissa Mark Viverito, as indicated, former Speaker of the New York City Council, co-founder of 21 and 21, now known as the New Majority, and the first Latina to hold the position of Speaker. Here today, my capacity as a board member for Rank the Vote, New York City, a nonprofit organization that was founded in 2019 to bring ranked choice voting to New York City and has been educating voters for the last 2 election cycles since our landmark win. My testimony also reflects the convergence of my longstanding professional and personal interest electing more women to public office and how ranked choice voting helped get us there. Oh, sorry very much. I'm trying to scroll and read this while I'm talking to you. Charter revision commissions are given immense authority to reshape the city's charter, and I look forward to its recommendations. However, I want to be unequivocal. This commission should not undo the work of its most immediate predecessor, and more importantly, undo the will of an overwhelming majority of voters by attempting to repeal ranked choice voting as it contemplates changes to the charter. A lot can be said about New York's elections and what works and doesn't work for everyday New Yorkers. In 2019, voters had the opportunity to reimagine how New York City votes with ranked choice voting. With 2 election cycles under our belt, it's clear this reform has had a positive impact on voters, elected officials, candidates, and ultimately contributed to a more representative democracy. As a former city council member and city council speaker, I know what it is like to work in a male-dominated legislative body that does not truly reflect New York City's vibrant communities. When I was first elected to the city council in 2006, there were 16 women in council. By the time I left office, there were just 10. That's why in 2017, I co-founded 21 and 21 with the mission of electing 21 women to the city council in 2021. Spoiler alert, and hence the name change, we smashed our goal and are now the New Majority with 31 women, the majority of whom are women of color, with a seat at the table, fighting for their neighbors and communities under the leadership of yet another woman speaker, Speaker Adams, the first Black speaker of the New York City Council. Ranked choice voting was instrumental to our success. Under the old system, too often women were told to wait for our turn. I definitely was told that. Or worse, 2 women couldn't possibly run in the same election. Certainly not 2 women of color, for fear of spoiling the race by dividing the vote. Ranked choice voting helped us turn the page on these antiquated and unfair political operating norms. With ranked choice voting, the more women, the better. During the 2021 cycle, the New Majority endorsed 74 women in 35 races. That's because gone are the days in which voters could only choose 1 candidate. Now voters can rank up to 5 candidates, meaning voters now have more voice and more choice and never have to worry about wasting their vote. With ranked choice voting, you can still vote for your favorite, but also have a few backups. And if you don't want to rank, you don't have to. I remember in a couple of races where I opted to just vote for 1 person. So you have that option as well under this system. And it wasn't just candidates who benefited from ranked choice voting. We had the highest turnout primary election in 30 years. 85% of voters ranked at least 2 candidates in the Democratic mayoral primary, and nearly 50% of voters used all 5 rankings on their mayoral ballot. And they kept on ranking. 70% of voters ranked at least 2 candidates in their city council race. Voters like and understand that RCV allows them to vote their values while supporting multiple candidates that best reflect them. The nature of RCV also forges better candidates who cannot rely on simply turning out their base, but have to campaign to a broader constituency and therefore develop the consensus building skills that are essential to the work of actually governing. And as we prepare for the next local election cycle, Rank the Vote NYC, along with its citywide network of community education partners, will be on the ground educating voters and making sure every New Yorker is confident and prepared as they head to the polls next June. I also do want to highlight that ranked choice voting has been studied by different, there have been different efforts to study the results, not only in New York City, but in other locations. And again, it validates that not only do more women get elected, but more diversity is brought to the table. And we've seen that in the short time that it's been in place here in New York City. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak. I've always been a very strong supporter of RCV. I still am, obviously. And I hope that it remains our system here in New York City. So thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you so much, former speaker. Is there any questions? Hearing none. Our next speaker. Frank Morano, are you on?
I am, commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you. This was actually going to be the one meeting where I was not going to focus on nonpartisan elections or proportional representation, because I've said a lot to you guys already, and you guys have been very patient with me. The one thing I'll add, just because several of the speakers, several of whom I agree with, some of whom I disagree with, have brought up, and some of the commissioners have brought up, is the issue of voter turnout and what effect different electoral changes would have on voter turnout. I obviously can't tell you that switching to nonpartisan elections or proportional representation, as John Ketchum articulately espoused, would lead to an increase in voter turnout. However, one thing throughout American history that we've seen is that competitive elections produces higher voter turnout. And in elections where there's ranked choice voting or proportional representation, I think it's a much greater likelihood that we'll see competitive elections. My 2 cents on that. And while I do disagree with Mr. Ketchum on the importance of keeping a party label, I do think his recommendations in terms of single transferable vote were right on the money. I think the one that he mentioned in terms of final five is definitely at best unproven and at worst very discriminatory towards people that are members of minor parties. To follow up on Speaker Viverito and Ms. Lerner's comments on ranked choice voting, I want to echo them. But part of the problem with what the prior commission did, and a part of the problem with switching to a system like Final Five, is there's one aspect under our current system that's very confusing to the voter, which is we vote one way in the primary and in special elections, and then in a totally different way for the general. I would urge the commission, rather than consider doing away with ranked choice voting, I would urge the members of the commission to consider, if you don't go along with nonpartisan elections, I would urge the members of the commission to consider expanding ranked choice voting to the general election, because that's really where it's most effective. For starters, what do we hear whenever anybody talks about voting for a third party candidate, whether it's Ralph Nader, Ross Perot, Robert Kennedy, Jill Stein? We always hear that there's going to be a spoiler effect. And if you're voting for Nader, you're really voting for Bush. If you're voting for Perot, you're really voting for Clinton. The place where ranked choice voting can be most effective is in the general election, because it does away with that horrible spoiler effect. And the last thing that I'll mention is to build upon the work of the commission in 2010, which Chairman Chisora served on. One of the things that that commission did, which was great, is lowered the number of signatures required to get on the ballot. At the time, if you wanted to run for office or for city council as a Republican or a Democrat, it would take 900 signatures. If you wanted to run as an independent, it would take 2,700 signatures. One of the things that the commission wisely did in that year was they lowered the number to 450 signatures. And even the members of the commission staff were unsure of whether they had the legal right to do that. They were saying, do we have the ability to do this? Is this a state law thing? And sure enough, that change made by that commission, reducing the number from 2,700 signatures to 450 signatures, has withstood judicial scrutiny. And I think the case is clear that you do have the right to alter the number of signatures. So what I would suggest to open up the process even more to everybody that wants to run for office, allow candidates running for city council, mayor, controller, the option of getting on the ballot, of not submitting any signatures, and instead put up a filing fee equivalent to 1% of the salary for the office that you're seeking. Not only would do away with the costly, mechanism of challenging signatures, which is so mired in bureaucracy and everything else, it would actually generate a little bit of revenue for the city. And in states and municipalities that have this filing fee option in lieu of signatures, we have not seen 900 candidates run for office, and voters, even in elections with a lot of candidates, have shown that they have no problem figuring out who the serious candidates are versus people that are running just to see their name on the ballot. So I would ask the commission, in addition to making ranked choice voting implemented for the general election, please consider an alternative avenue to petitions to allowing people to get on the ballot. My suggestion would be a filing fee. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Hearing none. Our next speaker is Claire Scottermine. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Good evening. I think you did, but it was a little hard to hear. Claire Stottlemyre. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Claire Stottlemyre. I'm an attorney with the Legal Aid Society and a member of the Vote in New York City Jails Coalition, which is comprised of directly impacted New Yorkers, advocates, legal service providers, civic engagement groups, and elected officials, created in 2020 to address the unmet needs of eligible voters who are detained in New York jails. In New York, anyone who is incarcerated while serving a misdemeanor conviction or because they cannot afford their bail is eligible to vote. On Rikers Island, as of today, that's 6,305 individuals who retain their right to vote. There are no voting sites in New York jails, and therefore incarcerated New Yorkers struggle to participate and have their voices heard each election day. The Board of Elections finds the absentee ballot voting process as facilitated in part by the Department of Correction under the New York City Charter 1057, adequate despite data that shows widespread disenfranchisement and disparate impact upon communities of color. Our coalition assisted approximately 800 people with registering to vote between 2020 and 2022 at Rikers Island, but only 67 New Yorkers ultimately had their vote counted. In June 2023, the Department of Correction returned 74 completed ballots to the Board of Elections, but only 32 were counted. Additionally, in the same year, more than 100 ballot request forms submitted by the Department of Correction were rejected by the Board of Elections. No feedback was given as to why such a large percentage of ballots and ballot requests were rejected. I went to Rikers with our coalition last Wednesday, and we registered 68 New Yorkers to vote, but 0 of them will be able to vote in the New York primary happening on June 25th, because the Department of Correction did not turn in the forms by the deadline, which was, of course, this past Saturday. One Department of Corrections staff member is tasked with ferrying completed registration forms and absentee ballots between the jails and local BOE offices. As a result, requests for absentee ballots often go unfulfilled. The absentee ballot return rate at Rikers is significantly lower than the statewide rate. And when absentee ballots are actually delivered to the Board of Elections, they're frequently rejected and voters are not provided any explanation or opportunity to cure. The Board of Election has denied responsibility for this voting process and summarily rejects ballots rather than providing incarcerated New Yorkers an opportunity to cure, as they do for voters who are at liberty. These practices are in violation of New York state law, as well as the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act. While these agencies are busy passing responsibility off to the other, the impact upon communities of color is, of course, devastating. 92% of individuals detained in New York City jails are non-white, and our organizations have fought for equity on this issue, grounded in the reality that these policies are part of a practice that dates back to the founding of this country that seeks to exclude Black people from full participation in American life. This issue deserves our full attention and the attention of those who are paid by us to run the responsible agencies. If we care about fair and free elections and full participation in the democratic process, we must ensure real ballot access for all incarcerated citizens. So for the Charter Revision Commission, our demand is that the Section 1057A should be amended to address the needs of incarcerated New Yorkers, ensuring that both agencies must collaborate to ensure voting equity and access to the ballot. New York City should join many other counties throughout the country by providing polling sites in all of our jails. New York City can also strengthen the absentee ballot process in our jails by requiring the Board of Elections to facilitate the program directly, ensuring that voters have access to the agency, including registration forms, ballot requests, and education materials. Voters must be given the same opportunity to cure their ballots as those who are not incarcerated, and the Board of Elections must ensure that each voter's voice is heard. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Any questions? No questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Lena Cohen.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this evening. My name is Lena Cohen, and I am the Senior Manager of Civic Engagement at United Neighborhood Houses. United Neighborhood Houses, or UNH, is a policy and social change organization. We represent New York settlement houses together that reach 800,000 New Yorkers from all walks of life each year. So at UNH, we work to advance democracy by equipping settlement houses with nonpartisan tools that foster civic participation, aiming to close participation gaps among underrepresented populations. And a prime example of our success is actually the implementation of ranked choice voting in New York City. So back in 2019, New York City voters approved the charter amendment to establish RCV. And at UNH, what we did was supporting that by hosting educational workshops for hundreds of New Yorkers. And in our experience, talking with settlement house staff and the communities they serve, we heard loud and clear that ranked choice voting has been and continues to be a significant success for them. For example, compared to the most recent similar competitive mayoral primary, which actually took place back in 2013, turnout in the 2021 primary increased for all age groups after the implementation of ranked choice voting. Moreover, in 2021, we saw the results lead to the most diverse city council in the city's recent history. And plus, surveys showed that over 70% of voters felt comfortable using RCV, and they felt like it gave them more choices and better representation. Next, I would like to address fiscal responsibility. To promote fiscal responsibility and support working class New Yorkers, UNH recommends improving the city's human services contracting process. This would enable nonprofit providers like settlement houses to be more efficient and responsive to the communities they serve. However, the reality is nonprofit providers often experience significant delays with the city's contracting process. So I just wanted to uplift that because at UNH, we support revising the New York City Charter to set timeframes for each stage of that procurement process, which would improve the process overall for both the providers, but the New Yorkers that are receiving these services. So in closing, at UNH, we firmly believe that democracy functions best when all constituents are active and have opportunities to engage, which is why we appreciate this series of hearings held by the Commission. And we look forward to working with you all to promote civic engagement and find new ways to ensure fiscal responsibility in the years ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So we're hearing a lot about ranked choice voting tonight and I think over the last week or two. I just want to be clear. It doesn't seem that, or I should say, we are not here to repeal proposals and things that have already been put forward. But we are here to listen to New Yorkers to hear how we can make systems even better. So it's been considered, it's been voted on by the people. I and Connell were on that commission. And I just want to be clear that we're going to move forward and not to move backwards on ranked choice voting. Okay, Gloria Kim.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify tonight. My name is Gloria Kim, and I'm the Director of Policy, Research, and Impact at the Human Services Council. We are a membership organization representing over 170 human services providers in New York City. Just to echo what Leda testified about. So over the past several decades, government has transferred most legally mandated human services for New Yorkers to nonprofit human services providers who are contracted by the city to deliver programs helping New Yorkers thrive and weather life storms. So the procurement process is the prime mechanism for creating, funding, and awarding contracts to human services providers. And according to these organizations, an average of 77% of revenues came from government contracts. So the contracting system is complex, and a lack of collaboration and transparency in the development of requests for proposals, coupled with this complex process, it creates an inadequately funded set of programs and extensive delays in contract registration and payment. So the Comptroller's fiscal year 23 annual summary contracts report, it showed that even though the city procures over $12 billion in human services, more than 95% of total contract value for human service and nonprofit contractors were registered late in the first half of fiscal year 24. This means providers take enormous fiscal and legal risks by signing leases, hiring staff, and starting programs without a contract, or continuing to operate services on the verbal agreement that things will get sorted out. The delays create cash flow issues for providers who have to put off paying vendors, take out lines of credit that they have to pay interest on, and because providers can't get paid until the contract is registered. So the city and its residents ultimately bear the brunt of these problems, especially when those providers have to close programs or go out of business altogether because of the financial strains imposed by these late payments. And the result is that communities lose access to cherished neighborhood institutions and essential services, and the city is unable to carry out its human services programs. For instance, last year you might have heard about Sheltering Arms, which was a 200-year-old nonprofit. They had to close its doors last year because of challenges from the pandemic, but also chronic underfunding and the late government contract payments. So the city charter creates a 30-day timeframe for the controller to register a contract. And we think that Chapter 13 of the city charter should be amended to require the procurement policy board to set contracted timelines for each step of the procurement process and regularly report on the compliance of the contracting agencies. So there are many steps from the announcement of the award to registration, and with the data acquired through Passport, which is the city's procurement system, there should be mandated timeframes to hold the contracting agencies accountable for the delayed procurement processes, resulting in human services providers waiting months and sometimes years to be paid for the services provided. And building off of this recommendation, we also believe that there needs to be a mechanism to hold the city to a timeframe for registration. So we also suggest amending the charter so that nonprofits can actually collect interest when the city pays late. So while the goal is that no contracts should ever start before payments are made, nonprofits shouldn't have to bear the cost of any late payments. So we recommend that the payment procedure include a requirement that the city is responsible for interest on late payments, including late payments due to late contracting registration. And also to echo the Independent Budget Office's recommendation at the last hearing, to implement these important procurement improvements, the charter should establish a mandate describing the specific responsibilities for the Mayor's Office of Contract Services. It's really crucial for MOCs to have charter authority to ensure city agencies meet contracted deadlines and be able to improve procurement processes across programmatic agencies. We also have a number of other recommendations, but these are the main ones that we were focusing on. Thank you so much for giving me the time to testify tonight.
Thank you very much. Pedro Suarez.
Thanks, everyone. Again, Pedro Suarez with the Third Avenue Business Improvement District. I'm the executive director. The Third Avenue Business Improvement District represents the corridor along Third Avenue from 148th Street to 153rd Street in the Melrose Mott Haven neighborhood of the South Bronx. I wanted to elevate a few things. One, I want to double tap on what was shared most recently by my colleague Gloria Kim. 100% agree on the recommendations regarding the city's contracting process. This has a significant impact, particularly on business improvement districts across the city, oftentimes who receive funding that is on a reimbursement basis. So just wanted to double tap. No need to repeat there. I think she captured everything greatly there. A few other issues that I want to elevate, and again, I don't have specifics on where exactly within the city charter, but a few issues that I think we should pay attention to that I do think that the city charter could be potentially clearer on. One is making sure that we are mandating the relevant city agencies as it pertains to studying the impact of methadone clinics, particularly in communities in the Bronx, particularly in the South Bronx, where there's a high concentration of them. And I think that, again, people who need these services should receive them, right? But I think we need to look at the concentration of clinics within specific zip codes and the impacts that they're having on the community from an equity perspective, and making sure that communities are sharing the responsibility across the city, not just in the Bronx, because it's having a tremendous impact on the quality of life in the neighborhoods that the district serves, as well as other parts of the Bronx. And so I encourage us to look at least mandating that we're studying those impacts and sharing that with the state, who I know is also involved when it comes to the methadone clinics across the city. So I know it's a complex issue, but we really need to look at the impacts that it's having on particular neighborhoods in the South Bronx. The other issue that I wanted to elevate here is related to land use and really empowering communities to have greater autonomy when it comes to vacancies, particularly in underserved and marginalized communities, and what businesses or what organizations in those communities can do from an economic development standpoint. And this comes from, the work that's currently being done with the City of Yes initiative, and making sure that we are not working in silos, and taking what we learned from the City of Yes initiative and incorporating it into the city's charter in terms of recommendations for addressing land use and how we can make sure that communities are responsive to the ever evolving landscape as it pertains to economic development and creating jobs for New Yorkers. And then lastly, I'll say that when it comes to unlicensed street vending across the city, I think that the city charter needs to be clear in terms of who's responsible for addressing some of those challenges, and how we support unlicensed vendors onto a path of getting to open a business properly and appropriately with the city's regulations, because right now there are communities across the city where there's a high volume of street vending that just is not sustainable. So really looking at where the city charter can be clearer around how we address this issue and who's accountable and who's responsible for really managing that situation, because there are communities, particularly like Third Avenue, where we have a high volume of street vendors, and it's not really clear how we're going to move forward with addressing some of the challenges that come with that. And so those are some of the points that I wanted to elevate in my role as Executive Director of the Third Avenue Business Improvement District. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We have, I believe, Roxanne.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, hi, how are you? My name is Roxanne Delgado. I am a Bronx resident most of my life.
I'm sorry,
And I'm listening to, I'm sorry, what?
Delgado.
Yes, Delgado. Yeah. And I just wanted to make some, express my opinions regarding first, the Hominy Stop bill. I have to agree with Ms. Mona Davis, and I live in the Bronx most of my life. And most people here don't complain that there's too many officers. They all complain that there isn't enough, insufficient number of officers, the lack of enforcement, the lack of quality of life now. Neighborhoods are turning upside down because basically everybody knows there's no enforcement. They could do whatever they want, whenever they want. And it has really been an undue burden on marginalized and low-income communities that don't have the resources to have tools to protect themselves or to leave the area. And they're stuck in a neighborhood that has really deteriorated so rapidly within the last 2 years. And it's just unbelievable how the neighborhoods are changing. And my friend told me that it's happening throughout the city. It's just not in the Bronx, but in the Bronx, it affects us more heavily because, as I said, we don't have the resource to alleviate the issues that are happening in our community. So I have to agree that we have to address public safety. Another one issue in the city, public safety. And we have to try to get away from this rhetoric of defunding NYPD. And mind you, I'm not for police. I'm for criminal justice reform. But I want to live like my neighbors do. We want to live in a community where we can walk safely while being concerned that we're going to be randomly attacked now, because attacks happening randomly. It's not something that you're having a disagreement with someone. It's happening randomly at any time of the day, not just late in the evening. So public safety is the number one concern for the city. Number two, public advocate. Yes, interesting. I know I was at the City Charter Revision Commission over 10 years ago. And I'm still waiting. Why isn't the commission won't pose this question to the city? Do we want a public advocate office? Yes or no? Because it's of the people, by the people, for the people. We should decide how we like to be governed. The public advocate has no executive, legislative, or judicial powers, no enforcement power. And I feel like this is something that has been been questioned many decades ago. Why do we have this office still operating at taxpayers' expenses? So I would like you to hopefully consider putting this on ballot should the public advocate office exist as a governing agency. Secondly, elections. I have to agree, either nonpartisan elections or expand the ranked choice voting into the general election. And I disagree with the fact that the ranked choice election is the reason why we have more diversity in our elected offices. It's not that, it's the demographic of the city has changed a lot. So you could look at this district, city council, we have where we have women or people of color, look at the demographic of that district that they serve. So it's not just, you can't just say ranked choice voting brought more diversity, more women. That's an opinion, that's not fact-based. And it definitely has not increased the voting. Voting turnout is still as low as ever. Community boards, this is the reason why I joined this meeting. I'm sure many of you have read many headlines regarding my board, Community Board 11. But it's not just Community Board 11 that's dysfunctional. It's just how Community Board operates throughout this, especially in the Bronx. It's actually not a tool for empowerment. It's actually a tool for disempowerment, where they don't do minutes, they don't follow the open meetings law, they don't abide by FOIL, they don't, there's no outreach that's mandated by the city charter, especially when it comes to ULA process. There's lots of conflict of interest, financially, personal. It's unbelievable the corruption and the lack of dysfunction we have in community boards. And I personally would think we should eliminate community boards, but I know that's not going to happen. But I think one of the main things we should do is that district manager position should be electable. Because right now, district manager is at the whim and will of 51 members of the board. And what happens outside the board is not his or her concern. And that's an ongoing issue out board where he just abides, well, the board said it's okay. So even the BP's office like, well, we can't do anything. The board is the one that hires and disciplines and terminates their staff. So this board, the district manager and their staff abide by the whims and wills and the idiocy of their board members, instead of addressing the needs of the whole community that we basically fund their salaries. So I would like that district manager position to be electable, because I know you would not eliminate community boards, even though I think that's the best thing for the community. It'll be because community boards are like a wall between the agencies, proposals, and the community. And usually community boards do not reflect the opinion or the will of the community. What they do is all these backdoor deals, talking to agency. Well, you fix my block and we'll go along with yours. And so definitely, let me wrap it up. So again, public advocate, should that office be, that should be put on a ballot where that office should exist. DM, district manager for community board, which now holds district service cabinet meetings for 2 years, and it's mandated by city charter, but there's no mechanism to enforce what the city charter puts on community boards, because both the BP's office and every city agency, including the mayor's office, said that it falls on the board members to enforce or to follow it. So community board, fix the dysfunction.
Thank you.
Election, make it nonpartisan, or expand the ranked choice voting into general election. And lastly, no more with this defund NYPD, because you're not helping Black and brown people. You're actually making more of us victims of crime. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Michael Darrell Torres.
Can you hear me? Perfect. Thank you to the Charter Revision Commission and Lincoln Hospital for hosting us this evening. My name is Michael Torres, and it is an honor to sit before this commission and discuss the powerful undercurrents happening in our great city. I also wish to acknowledge, though not presently here, Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr., an exemplary public servant whom I observed as a young political staffer and someone I deeply respect.
We are, by the way, thrilled that Ruben Diaz Jr. is part of our commission.
Thank you. But let us not forget why we are having this hearing on the revision of the city charter. The city council, who voted in overwhelming support to curb the power of the executive in a 46-4 vote, passed the legislation to expand the city council's authority to approve or block appointing commissioners by the mayor. The city council would like us to believe that this legislation is pure-hearted and concerns itself solely with good governance. The council says to us, how can we not support accountability of mayoral appointees? This is a simple good governance practice applied in legislative chambers across the country and specifically in the chambers of Congress. Yet the reality is clear. The council wishes to weaken executive power, and the city of New York will be worse off because of it. By stripping the executive of unilateral appointment power, the legislature will increase in both power and arrogance. Term limits have created a top-heavy city council, a legislature powered by the speaker and heads of powerful committees. Instead of showing this reality, they wish to convince us that their oversight of future agency heads is appropriate, when the reality is they are deeply motivated to take advantage of a politically weakened mayor. They are prisoners of their political moment, unable to foresee the characters of future legislatures and mayors. Would these same provisions be proposed with a mayor as popular as Franklin Roosevelt or Mario Cuomo in their respective primes? Or would these same provisions be proposed with a fractured combative council? No. This is a brazen attack to make the current council stronger and to further cloud the voters' ability to discern where to lay the responsibility for both the accomplishments and failures of the executive. And I want to make it very clear that this testimony is not an endorsement of the current administration's successes or failures. This testimony is based on the conviction that a strong executive is necessary to govern the city of New York. As one famous New York lawyer put it, a feeble executive implies a feeble execution of the government. A feeble execution is but another phrase for a bad execution. And a government ill-executed, whatever it may be in theory, must be, in practice, a bad government. That is what Alexander Hamilton wrote in Federalist Paper 70 in support of a strong executive branch. And any attempt to weaken this power is an invitation to 4 challenges: unnecessary bureaucracy, unproductive gridlock, lack of appropriate accountability, and distrust between the branches of government that do not have the best interests of the city at heart. Because of this, the people of New York should not adopt the city council's recommended revisions to the city charter. Thank you for your time.
I have to tell you, anybody who quotes Federalist Papers jumps up in my list. So thank you. Thank you for those comments. Okay, do we have any other speakers on Zoom? Do we have any other speakers here who would wish to testify in person? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues now for any final thoughts, should you like. Why don't we start to my left, Ms. McGraw.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming out and making this a real
priority in your life, not only for yourself, but for the city as a whole. We appreciate everything that was said here today, and we're honored to be here to listen to your concern and hear what you have to say, because we are here for the people and to be the voice for the people. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you're going to be hearing this from us. And I'm thanking you because I'm very proud to sit here on this commission and watch every one of your faces. You're listening, and you care. That is very important. That is what we want to see and hear. To give you an opportunity to voice your opinions, because this is your community. This is your city. And that's why I'm very proud of you. And please spread the word to get people out. It is important that they have an opportunity to voice their opinion and exercise their right as taxpayers. Thank you. Get home safe, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Madam Dukes.
I echo my fellow colleagues that it is so important. You come from work, you have other things you could be doing tonight, but this is so important. I have tracked and read, as our chair said, Susan, it's good to see you again with the kind of work we've done over the years. And I have had the privilege over the last 3 weeks to read the kind of work that you all did, you and Cal and Ruben Diaz, and many men and women before me. So we stand on the shoulders of great New Yorkers, especially you, Mr. Chairman. After 3 rounds to become the chair, I really applaud you. But we're not here because we don't have anything else to do. My days and evenings are full, but I made a commitment because I love New York City. I am a New Yorker. So thank all of you for coming out and listening and giving me your time. And for those who presented to us tonight, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. Hi, we're gonna close it up for us tonight.
Well, great. Thank you, everyone who came here in person, attendance, those of you who are online, who attended this hearing. I want to thank all those folks who gave testimony today so that we had the opportunity to hear from the people of the city, which made the testimony that I heard this evening made this a very potent hearing. And I just want to say how much I appreciate people taking the time, their own time to come forth and bring those thoughts, those ideas of how we make our city better, better governed. So thank you.
Thank you. And we have Commissioner Christopher Lynch on Zoom. Mr. Lynch?
Yes, good evening. I just want to say thank you to all the participants that came out to testify this evening. It was very eye-opening and grateful for those ones. And like I said from the beginning of having the voices of those ones who cannot have their voices heard, and appreciative of the young lady that testified, Ms. Claire, who came out to speak up for those justice involved individuals, to speak up about how their rights towards voting and the whole process is being violated there. So just want to thank everyone for participating this evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I also want to Commissioner Nye is on Zoom. I'm not sure. Commissioner, you'd like to say anything before we wrap up? No? Okay. So just a quick comment as we close. Again, it's great to be in the Bronx, and I think we heard a lot of intriguing testimony, some new items, some recurring items. And I think we are excited about Thursday. We will be in my home borough of Brooklyn. So I asked Bronxites, come visit us in Brooklyn, where we will focus on public safety. So a lot of great things happening, and I think we appreciate your continued testimony. I reiterate, if you can come to a meeting, join us on Zoom like the dozens and dozens of folks that are on tonight. And please submit your testimony, because I think you've heard it from me, you heard it from Commissioner Dukes. We do read it. So get it to us so that we can be really engaged with what New Yorkers are thinking. So I thank you all for being here. Thank you to our hosts again, and we will see you on Thursday. Thank you very much.
Motion adjourned.
Motion to adjourn. I think we all say yes.
Yes.
Thank you.